Good day and good evening, and welcome back to Walk and Talk with me, Caetsu Chaiji, but you can just call me Kai. Tonight, as usual, with this, we go for a little walk, we have a little talk, and like last time, I have a few pit stops where I think we'll like check out a clip instead of having like all of the clips at the end, so that I'm like, and then we don't really get to them anyways. I have a bit more of a loosely planned path where I'm like, I have a feeling of where we'll end if we reach it, but we'll probably have multiple stops on the way, and whether we actually reach that destination, who knows, we'll just continue next time. That said, hey Taldemar, hey Garrick, hey Afi, hey Naomi, hey Agent Monica, hey Seros, hey Lana, hey Mizunashi, hey Rust, hey Ilya, hey Gazel, hey Snowy Shiro, hey Fako, hope you're all doing very well. And, whoa. And hey Ivis and Yannick, hope you're doing well as well. But, let's start the walk by going approximately back the direction we came from. Also, hey Darkrin, hope you're doing well. Has it been that long since you've caught the start of a stream? Have you actually never caught the start? Good to have you. Also, hey Ham, hope you're doing well. And of course, because I don't have a very clear end destination, I don't have a timer this time either. You almost caught the start of one of the procs. Well, maybe you caught enough of the start you got the first pull. That could be something. So random side thing, just off the back of yesterday's stream, which I know not as many are interested in, but our journey through Fellowship, we will probably actually finish that dungeon raiding grind after this stream. And funny how just as we're finishing it, an event starts where there is actually a reward that is locked behind having cleared an eternal 20. Our record is 17. Now the question is whether we care. It's a mount. Also, hey Tong, hope you're doing well. But conveniently, that still means that we finished this Fellowship grind just in time before next week drops the Final Fantasy XIV major patch. And as usual, what I am the most curious about with a major patch, when I'm like waiting for the patch notes, I'm like, are there any balance changes? Did they change a job again? Not that I want that to happen necessarily, but for me, if there's no job changes, then there's significantly less in a patch. Is it expected to happen? Is what expected to happen? Just to be sure. Darkrin says, what mount? Just to clarify, Fellowship being a different game, the mount that is locked behind Progress looks like a toy mouse, like a giant toy mouse mount with, you know, like a clockwork. And the noise says, how much ground have you covered with these streams? I haven't kept track, but in the past, we tried to figure out what the longest walk was, and I'm pretty sure that if you want a long walk to be competitive, like if you want to figure out what the longest walk is, then it has to include Churning Mist as the destination. Because Churning Mist is that long to walk through, but only out, because when you leave it, it's there is like a skip you can do that you can't do on the way in, which is why it has to be the destination. Then I'm pretty sure that the furthest in the opposite direction is either Ultima Thule or Mare Lamentorum. Which means that that's basically it. Those two can be out or in, doesn't matter. Which means that you'll probably start with one of them and then end in Churning Mist. It's a pretty long walk. And the reason why that happens is nearly any walk you can make, once it reaches a certain length, you will pass through Limbs Elementa. Like, there are long walks you can make that does not pass through Limbs Elementa, but if they have to be among the longest, then they actually have to be passing through Limbs Elementa. Because you can go almost anywhere from Limsa. Also, hey, Pupomit and Sylvia, hope you're doing well. Job changes are not expected to happen. However, in Dawntrail, drastic changes were made to Viper and Black Mage in patch 7.05, I believe. And drastic changes to Black Mage in 7.1 and 7.2. Which means that it's not out of the question that they might do some more drastic changes. It is unlikely, but it's not out of the question. Anything could happen. And as I said, it's not that I'm like wanting changes, but for me, that's where it gets the most interesting, because if the changes... Oh yeah, that's also true. Samurai also got a drastic change. Or a few drastic changes. It's not that I need any changes. It's just that if there are none, or it's just like small balance changes, then as far as I'm concerned, not that much changed. But that's also because my preference in games is you have a very intricate character that you play, and then it is put in various situations. And that is also why, like, we've, like, with Endwalker and also Dawntrail, a common conversation that has been had, less so with Dawntrail, more so with Endwalker, I believe, is that oh yeah, but if they make the jobs simpler, then they can get away with more complex boss fights to compensate. And for me, that feels like, oh, well, if we make the main dish suck, then we can really make, like, the sauce nice. And it won't, and it'll be okay. And I'm like, yeah, but the main dish goes in everything. The casual content, the slightly harder content, the hardest content, all of it. So if the jobs suck, then if the main dish sucks, then every addition to the dish has to be amazing. Otherwise, the game sucks. Which also means that whenever a boss has been released that is kind of whatever, it will suck more, relatively speaking, if the jobs are kind of meh, to make space for a really intricate boss. And because my like entry into this kind of stuff is exactly more focused on the jobs, means that if there are no job changes, then sure, there are new fights, but nothing's really changed as far as I'm concerned. Not that it needs to. Also, Isaac Boy, and Brontoman Asymmetricon, and 00, hope you're doing well. And Uber Penguin. Dragoon feels a bit weak so far, at around 60 to 70 range. It could be a little bit slow to get its options, which might make it feel weak. It could also be, if it's like the damage numbers, it could be a gear thing. It could be a gear thing. But there are also some, like, because of some of the changes to Dragoon with Dawntrail, there are also some points where it is legitimately a little bit weaker. Just to give a random example, the winged glide action you have, the gap closer thing, used to be an attack. So you just don't have that anymore. And in lower levels, they don't really give you anything to replace it. So until you hit like the higher levels where like they have the stuff that is quote unquote meant to replace it, you're technically a little bit weaker. Also to your question about static doctrine, I'm going to be continuing with the static I already have. We're just rearranging the positions a little bit. I'm going to be tanking, for instance. Asymmetricon also adds, it also means anytime you play older content that isn't designed for simple jobs, it's very empty. Exactly. Like basically, if you make the jobs simpler to give room for new bosses to be more complex, it just means that all of the fights that are designed assuming the job is more complex will just feel really boring by comparison. Which is not good. Like straight up, it's not very good. But that's also a problem that I've mentioned before somewhat. That in my video about horizontal versus vertical progression, that because all of this old content is kept relevant, right? It means that whatever happens, it will be affected by any changes you make. And it also means that whenever you make any changes to the current state of the game, it will be reflected in the older parts of the game that can't but just be tossed aside, like compared to, for instance, World of Warcraft. Bring out your bingo cards, I suppose, if you have any. Where once a new expansion comes out, almost immediately, like thunder from clear skies, the previous raid tier from the raid tier from the last expansion is now irrelevant. No one cares. It's not relevant anymore. You're not gonna do it anyway. Maybe you'll do it when you can solo it in a few years or something. That's it. Meanwhile, Final Fantasy XIV, you can it'll be easier, but you can still legitimately prog these old fights on a somewhat even playing field. I can't recall if it was Saras that spent half a year proccing Brute Justice Savage. Synced, of course. It might have been minimum item level, no echo even. Probably was. And that's like, it's not quite a decade old, I believe, but it's getting there, and it's still relevant. Also true, Gazel, if they one day later down the line change their minds and then make the jobs more complex again, then those fights might now be too difficult. Akron says, what are some outlets to find a static? There are Discords dedicated to it. I think there are also subreddits dedicated to it. Yannick says, I think this game has a problem of rigidity. All of the RNG is 50-50 as if one variant of mechanic happens first or second. If RNG was in gear stat values, mob HP and damage and much more, then it would make sense to simplify job designs. Yeah, if there was more randomness, then it would probably help to make things a little bit simpler. A lot of things boil down to stand here and wait for X to resolve. I mean... I know that you're serious, but it is a little bit funny because, like, super late Endwalker, there was this video making the rounds of someone that basically said that the rating in 14 sucked because it all boils down to stand and let thing resolve. Which, if you deconstruct everything, then it all becomes stand and let thing resolve. It's just what you do before you stand still and let thing resolve. Super Penguin says, does WoW still not have a level sync mechanic? I thought they had timeless or whatever. I can't remember if it's called timeless, but there is that... time walking is a regularly recurring event in World of Warcraft where they enable certain dungeons to be ran with level sync, quote unquote. That means they will both sync low-level characters up to the appropriate level and sync high-level players down to the appropriate level. And let's just say that the syncing in that mode is in such a way that it's very clear that they don't care that it is fairly, like, reasonably balanced. It's an event. It's just there to be fun. Most of the things that you can sync to in those events are not balanced whatsoever. We're talking sometimes a specific class, when scaled down, like when low level and then synced up, do ludicrous amounts of damage because they didn't really consider how that scales. And sometimes it's the other way. And yeah, exactly, Asymmetricon. It's designed to be funny, not to be a part of the interior, while Final Fantasy XIV syncing is meant to be a part of the interior. DDFB says 99% of real-life jobs are stand still until thing resolved. You know, that is actually a good point. I'll say to you and Kazu. Hope you're doing well. And Red Panda. Could they perhaps introduce platform mechanics into raids? They could, yes. Once upon a time, they kinda did. And at the same time, in Savage bosses, they seem to sometimes be more likely to prevent you from doing it. When I say they kinda did, is before A Realm Reborn. So, you know, 1.0 days. The Nail Vandanas fight from Coils of Bahamut featured verticality. You had to chase the boss up like a staircase of rocks to fight them a bit. It was apparently a really long fight and a really slow fight too. And that's just one example, as far as I know. Since A Realm Reborn, pretty much all... Actually, not since A Realm Reborn. Since Heavensward, pretty much all fights take place on a flat platform. Why? Well, the Twintania fight from Coils of Bahamut is on a more environmental battlefield with, like, you know, not perfectly flat surfaces like rocks and whatnot, and some mechanics would just jank up if you stood in just the right spot. And how do you prevent that? Oh, easy. Just don't have any verticality. Just make everything a flat surface. And then you see how nearly all boss arenas look now. So it is a solution. And yeah, the example of the opposite is exactly M8S. The second phase of Howling Blade on Savage has 5 circular platforms. And these platforms have teleporters between them, so we can like teleport between two. But there's a cooldown of like 2 seconds. And in specific phases, there's a cooldown of like 7 seconds. Like they really force you to choose a platform and stay there for a bit. But the platforms are actually spaced out just so that if you could jump, you would be able to just jump from platform to platform. You could just... Who needs the teleporters? You can just jump. But when phase 2 starts, they give you a debuff that prevents you from jumping altogether. Exactly, because then you would be able to trivialize that mechanic. And the reason why we know that is because when you beat the boss and like the fight is over, you don't have the debuff anymore. So you can test that you can in fact jump across, and you can. So they could do that. But I have a feeling they won't. And it is just like, that's just part of like when I say, I've said many times that I want to see more distinct, different looking arenas and whatnot. Because that's something they can do to make things more interesting. Oh, that is true, Bobomet. For the rivers in the Sugar Ride fight, there's a little bit of verticality. That is true. Which, by the way, means that if you're in the middle of a cast and you stand on the spots that become water, you will actually get your action cancelled because you're like, boop, down like half a character height, half a lizard person's height, right? A whole potato's height, I suppose. Down. And then it's like, well, you moved. But it is more interesting when the arena isn't always a square or a circle. Yeah, they've definitely been playing around with arenas more in this raid tier, that is true. And that is also true, DDFB, that 14 definitely would run into trouble with more verticality. But it is worth mentioning that they used to do it. And then they stopped because of various reasons. But they've tried again, as you can see. Now, in regards to clips that I have, for us all to have a look at, I have a clip from Sackboy, I have 2 from Shaq, 1 from Ibis, 1 from Gassel, and 1 from Yannick. Ah, okay. Nosrel, it's because YouTube has switched over to using your ad sign. I believe you can go in and change it. But it's really difficult for me to tell because my menus here, I can see your profile picture and match it and see, oh yeah, that is Nosrel. But in the main chat box I use, I can't see it. Ham says, in general, verticality makes a bunch of actions jank up. Some people think that Elisa, or whatever that map is called, it's a crystalline conflict map, has no map mechanics, but in reality, it has ramps. That's true. That's a good point. And that does matter. Certain jobs in PvP are massively inconvenienced by verticality. And on that note, Cabal, won't you be happy to know, if you pay really close if any of you paid really close attention when Yoshi P was showing off the new frontline map, have you seen how much verticality that one has? Free Main says, I assume the fights with the levitate mechanics aren't being counted in this verticality argument? No, because clicking a button, gaining a buff that makes you levitate, actually is more so like... you're still standing at that XYZ location. You just have a buff that happens to, like, visually move your character up. They haven't actually moved, but it just moves your character and the camera up. But because it's controlled by a buff, the game can still view your character as not moving vertically. And usually the fights that have this kind of mechanic will make sure that the boss takes it into account. Exactly, it just checks whether you have the buff or not. If the boss has any mechanics that you could, like, dodge with it, then it's deliberate, because they specifically gave you a button to do it. Azangel and Free Main, hope you're doing well. And to be fair, when they have mechanics or arenas with some verticality, nowadays, a lot of the time, if there's even remotely the slightest bit of verticality, it's often very controlled. For instance, in some of the Alexander fights, there's the low and high elevation mechanic. But ultimately, it checks whether you are on one platform or the other, and that's all it needs to know. Yeah, looking at the clips here, I do believe we have Ivis here, but I don't think we have Shaq, so maybe we should give him a chance, because I believe Shaq features in your clip. No worries, Free Main. It's also not meant as, like, the whole point of this discussion is not to be like, they don't have verticality, and no, that one doesn't count, and that one counts, and that one doesn't count. It's more like the general example that it's more like the reason why we don't talk about examples like that is more so because it's not quite what we had in mind. Like, for me, it's mostly like the arena in general needs to have... It doesn't have to have verticality, as far as I'm concerned. But it would be very nice if you could have an arena that wasn't a circle or a square, and maybe wasn't perfectly flat. Like that's where I'm going with this. Also, hey, Blind in Color, hope you're doing well, and thank you. We visit every so often. It's the one place where we all can meet. So you want a diamond? Isn't that a square turned 45 degrees? Isn't the new trial gonna have raised platforms? It might. I don't know. I didn't look closely enough to notice. And I, like, as I've said, I kind of focus on what we already have. So when I'm saying I want this, I would like to get that, I'm basing it on what we currently have. Jose Vince, hope you're doing well. On that note, how about we start with Yannick's clip, because I do believe Yannick is here. I think. Indeed. It's a very short one. That's a very compact treasure room. Reading from the title, I'm assuming that you have a trap somewhere. Ham says E4S has some raised platforms and they include jumping off and are walls once you are down. When you say jumping off, do you mean like you can literally just like whoop, jump down from them naturally and then it's a wall? Or do you mean like if you run against the edge, your character like goes like and then jumps down like some sort of animation specifically? I'm assuming it's the first, but I wanted to get clarification. A level difference in the clip? Oh, it is just a different elevation. Okay. Oh, is that a bomb? Nice. Let me just check that again. I assume that you noticed that that was a bomb already here. And that's when you planned what you were gonna do. Because I don't see any other reason why you would dash forward, just hit the one guy and go, hey, wait a minute. Meanwhile, if I was doing this, I would probably have ran up to this and gone, welp. And would gradually chew through every single one by one. That is amazing. That is very nice. I did say this last time we checked the clip from Yannick as well. Is like, if you ever catch Yannick say something to the effect of, like, that makes it sound like deep dungeons are like, no, they're too easy, baby mode, or something. Like that it sounds like he's exaggerating how easy some things are in deep dungeon contexts. Just remember that that not only does Yannick pull like that, I don't in deep dungeons. Not only that, but Yannick also has I believe you have a top rank score now, isn't that right? Like a first place score? I think that was it. Top 1 World Reaper gameplay, yeah. So just take that, like just you know, take note of that when you hear Yannick talk about deep dungeon stuff. That it's a little bit of a different skill level. Hey Vibes, hope you're doing well. What else do we have? How's it, Kiwi? Hope you're doing well. I believe Gyazel is here as well. We could take that clip and then keep going a little bit. For context of the clip, it appears that we have 8 healers doing Leviathan hard. Well, normal, as Gyazel put it. Vibes, it's in the Discord server, and I grab the clips that I'm looking at before the stream starts. So this would be next time. As well as any thoughts on the magical girl design for the new outfits? I think they're very cute. I find it very funny that about half of the crafted gear is pink, and the other half is like it's like white and pink, and then the other half is black and purple. It could be, Vibes. The key is that usually people share clips for us to review here. But it could be. Right, and also Gyazel is main tanking. While we're at it. So we have Scholar, 4 white mages, 1 astrologian, and 2 sages. Oh yeah, it's not so much saying that you can't submit a clip that isn't specifically for this. It's just more that if you're submitting the clip because you're like, I just want more eyes on the thing I made, then it's probably not the correct like reason. Like, we're not that many, first of all. But get what I mean? But sharing something awesome or fun that happened is always fine. Someone might heal. You think? I'm not convinced. There's only 1 Medica 2 ticking. You know, my favorite bit here is the Scholar having the card buff. A preventable mistake from O12N. I'm going to guess that Omega F was placed in the center and then knockback caused problems. He's off. Hope you're doing well. Bronzos is not me using guys' stream to advertise my upcoming YouTube channel. Right? That would be a pretty funny clip, yeah. And Zav just climbed out of Leviathan. Oh. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if the raid had been 8 scholars, that things would have been fine. Just have 8 EOS, just partying. Anyone takes damage, immediately healed. Hey Nicholas, hope you're doing well. I'm glad to have you. Does Scholar have the highest DPS out of most of the healers? No. Nope. In this level range, level 50, Sage has more AoE DPS and single target DPS than Scholar. And White Mage has even, I believe, has even more single target DPS, if you like write out all the numbers. It's really close between Sage and White Mage. White Mage has Presence of Mind, Sage has Phlegma. Stone 2 has the most potency of single target filler. Dyscrasia has the highest of AoE spammable filler. And then, you know, Presence of Mind means more holies or more stones. Scholar isn't the strongest at damage, but it is really funny because Out of War is a gain on 1. Nice. But I would the reason why I said that 8 Scholars might work is because then you just have 8 EOS just healing. Yeah, what we're doing, Nicholas, is Walk and Talk is a little bit of a mix of Q&A with me, walking it around in-game, hanging out, and then I check some clips that the community, my community, has submitted to me. And then we look at them together. Sometimes it's someone asking for advice. Sometimes it's someone just sharing something funny or cool that happened. Whatever it is. And that's it. And right now we're just I've spread it out a little bit so that we don't just watch all the clips at the end. During Q, I was looking around the arena and commented that there was probably gonna be a push mechanic because of the lack of barriers. Yep. I think in the past 2 or 3 times I've gotten O12N in my Mental Roulette series, I've mentioned needing to be careful with placing Omega F and Omega M because of that. Right, should we go a little bit further? At 70, which Eggy is the best to use after Bahamut in Burst? Practically, like in raw numbers, it would be Ifrit. But I don't know how much buff there is to catch and whether there is any. But at level 70, Ifrit is the strongest. Second place goes to Titan, I believe. Asterisk to that. Let's go to the airship landing. And then Garuda. And the reason why it's an asterisk is because the reason that Titan is second... Gridania. The reason that Titan is second is because Garuda does not scale with speed very well at level 70. And that's correct, Snowshiro. Basically, Titan is just instant GCD. So if you're in melee range to auto attack, that's the potency gain. Like, that's it. That's where you get the potency from. Just having a look around to see where we could go. Alright, Kazu, enjoy your evening. But yeah, on the top of that, if you have spell speed, like, you need a bit. You need a bit for it to really, really matter. But if you have a bunch of spell speed, then Garuda is so bad that you summon Garuda for the summon damage, and then you just don't use Emerald Ruin because it's a damage loss over just casting regular Ruin, unless you need the instant capacity, like capability of it. If you don't need that, then just don't. This must be confusing with the people in Gridania. It might. It's pretty funny when people actually notice. Still struggling to get back into raiding for the time being. Oh, why is that? Oh, I know you meant that, Snowshiro. I was just clarifying. Personally, Sylvia, when they merged Eos and Selene, I also used Selene. But when they added Carbies as an option, I switched to using Carbies because I prefer Carbies. What do you mean, Vibes? Which is what? This is on Ravana Materia on OCE. You know, where everyone can visit. You can actually see it up here. It's visible up there. What about Rune 2? Wouldn't that be better? Ah, back in the days where Summoner also had an instant they could always use, but refused to because it was a damage loss. That's okay, Vibes. I was just more saying, if you can see this, if you simply, like, go to Google and write Final Fantasy XIV data centers, you'll get a list with all of the data centers. If you can find this, all of the names are unique, so you just need to look for the one that I am on. Might as well do nothing. Yeah, exactly, Snow. I know that it is really silly like that, but I'm not joking that the whole, oh, Holy and White is a damage loss on Pictomancer is like, has led to some Pictomancers not using Holy and White. As in, well, I guess it's better to do nothing then. And to clarify on that, because some might then go, wait, Holy and White is a damage loss? Holy and White Pictomancer action does just as much damage as Water and Blue. So it's like just skipping to your step 3 and just firing it as an instant cast with an AoE component, which actually makes it good on AoE. And it's also good for mobility. But if you do Fire and Red, Aero in Green, Water and Blue, and then a full set more, you can use Subtractive Palette, and then you can use Comet in Black, Blizzard in Cyan, Stone in Yellow, Thunder in Magenta. And the whole sequence of 3 1-2-3s, 1-2-3, 1-2-3, Subtractive Palette, Comet, 1-2-3, averages more potency than Holy and White. Which means if you have the about 29 seconds to do all that, then by all means, Holy and White is a damage loss over doing that. But if you don't, then it's not a damage loss. And if you can't, because, you know, mobility, then again, it's better than nothing. It's actually very, like, I'm just saying the reason why I have to go through that whole sequence of saying you have to do all of this and then it's less average potency is because it's like less than 1% damage, like DPS loss to do it when you don't have to. And exactly, Snowshoe. That's basically what it comes back to, is if you don't have 29 seconds to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, subtractive palette, comet, 1, 2, 3, then Holy and White suddenly jumps to the front. Which means if you only have 26 seconds, then Holy and White is a gain. Uh-oh. If you only have 20 seconds, then Holy White is a gain. If you only have 15 seconds, then Holy White is a gain. Hey Christopher, hope you're doing well. See, the trick is, Nicholas, that you have better options for bursting than Holy and White. Outside of a specific level range. Once you get Comet in Black, then you have significantly better options than Holy and White for bursting. When you don't have Comet in Black, you have a few a few situations where Holy and White will be included in your burst as a result. When should I use the Living Muse charges? Pretty much whenever you like. Asterisk. Essentially, when you are in a level range where you have Starry Muse, so your 2-minute burst, then you want to use... you want to be sure you have one Living Muse ready and available when you start the burst. Furthermore, you want to be sure that you have Morg of the Ages, or even better at higher level, Retribution of the Madine, ready for the burst. Either by literally having it on hand to weave first, before the Living Muse in case it generates another one, or by having the Living Muse generated during the burst. And then you just use them, you just make sure you use one there. Sometimes that means that you have to sit on like 2 charges or something to make sure you don't lose a Retribution of the Madine or Morg of the Ages out of burst or something like that. It's a lot simpler than it sounds. Let me put it like that. And if you're below the level range where Starry Muse is a thing, then you just send Living Muse basically whenever. If there's other people with raid buffs, you could of course hold the charge to use when they do something, but you can't guarantee that they will, so not reliable, right? And there is also a level range where you might not want to use Living Muse very much. I believe it is level 54 or 55 or something like that, that Pictomancer has their first potency gain trait. But let's just say that baseline, when you're like level 50, for instance, Pom Muse is... Just to be clear, Pom Muse is 400 potency, Winged Muse is 400 potency, Morg of the Ages is 500 potency, which means if you use Winged Muse, it also gives you Morg of the Ages, so that means that action is worth 900 potency combined. Like, drawing a Winged Muse is worth 900 potency. Drawing a Pom Muse is only worth 400 potency. Why does that matter? Because it takes 4 seconds to draw it, and Fire in Red at level 50 is 250 potency and takes 2.5 seconds, which means Pom Muse is 100 potency per second, Fire in Red is 100 potency per second. And Fire in Red results in Air in Green and Water in Blue, which is more than 100 potency per second. And so you don't want to use an odd number of Living Muses at level 50. You want to be sure you use an even number of Living Muses at level 50. Redmaster says Swiftcast is your friend. No, there's a very big problem there, Redmaster, because Swiftcast does not skip the GCD, which is 4 seconds. All the paintings for Pictomancer takes 3 seconds of cast, but has a GCD of 4 seconds. So you don't skip anything. It just means you can awkwardly run around for 4 seconds. That can be really handy as a mobility tool. But it does not actually reduce the GCD, so you still spent 4 seconds on it. Another angle to this is also that Pommuse has an AoE component. Important to take note of. The AoE component means that Pommuse is a gain on 2, even in that level range. No worries, Blind Column. Enjoy your night. 00 says, besides Viper, which melee DPS has the least buttons? Melee DPS with the least buttons. Of memory, I would guess Reaper. Should we take a look? So Viper has, let's see, 36 minus, I'm going to count roll actions. 36 minus 1, 2, 3, no, that's not right. 36 minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 24? Let's check Monk. Relatively speaking, I have the same extra buttons on all 6 melees. So I can just count how many more or less empty slots they have. To compete with Viper, you'd need 8 empty slots in my setup. Monk has 5, which means that they would have 27 buttons. And Ninja has 1, which means that they would have 31 buttons. Dragoon has 5. So 27. Reaper has 2. Oh. So 30. Samurai has 1. So 31. So I guess is that a tie between Monk and Dragoon on 2nd place? Hey Philippe, hope you're doing well. And hey Sally, hope you're doing well as well. And Joel, hope you're doing well as well. Monk has like no buttons. I mean, the problem is more that they have some buttons that have a lot of use. How many do machinists have? 27. Yeah, and Snow Shiro, I said I count roll actions. You must be miscounting something. I think. They should have 27 with roll actions, which would be 21 without. Simply as Monk needs only 1 dragon kick. Unfortunately, they've readjusted the power of Monk. The Endwalker dragon kick days are over. And that's correct, Taldemar. That's considered in my calculation. 21 buttons before roll actions is gross. I mean... On that note then, Cole, Viper has 18. Tongue says, I swear monk gets changed all the time. Yeah. Actually. Kind of varies how they change them. Ismetricon says, looks over at Fellowship characters with like 12 to 14 buttons. Yeah. In Fellowship, a hotbar, I believe, by default has 8 buttons. And you only need 2 of them to hold everything. And 3 of the buttons are from items. So you have 13 character-specific buttons. But the trick there is button count isn't important. What's important is what you do with the buttons. Like I do want to highlight that while this is all the buttons that Viper has they can put on their bars, they actually have more things that just unfurl from them clicking buttons. I think Summoner is also weird like that. Redmaster says, I'm curious what they use for foot graze and leg graze are. I can never find a use for them. They're both, in normal content, they're both super niche. In something like deep dungeons, they can be handy for kiting something. Or temporarily removing something from a fight. By just binding them to the floor and leaving. And that's also a good point, as Metricon, that if you try to compare 14's buttons with other games, it is worth pointing out that a lot of the time you have twice as many buttons in 14 because you need an AoE version. Like, for instance, like, speaking of Summoner, single target, single target, single target, AoE, AoE, AoE. Same button, but it's just a single target and AoE version. Single target, AoE. Same thing again. Like, if they, like, I'm not saying they should, and I don't know necessarily if it would be an improvement, but they could actually just add an AoE component to these 4 buttons, and then Summoner would have 4 less buttons. Haha, blah blah. Less. Summoner already has very few buttons. I get it. But again, like I've said the same thing about Pictomancer. You don't need these 2 to be separate. You don't need these 2 to be separate. You don't need these 2 to be separate. Because they are mutually exclusive. It makes no sense. You also don't need these 2 to be separate, to be frank. So there's like 4 buttons you could get rid of as well. And if we approach it with the same logic from Summoner, this and this button could also be merged for the same argument. Just make it have an AoE component. The main justification to not have the paints and the spenders on the same button is you wouldn't be able to see the cooldown unless you have already painted the thing. Which is a problem, because whether you want to paint the thing might be directly dependent on knowing the cooldown of it. However, they might be able to find a way to make a visual representation showing the cooldown on the motif so that you can see it. In fact, They could probably have just put the cooldown in the job gauge UI. But yeah, point being, there's a lot of places where 14 could easily, like, trim some buttons. Brontom says, didn't Pictomans allow you to be in subtractive palette and still use RGB on launch? No. Thought that was changed for people to stop clicking subtractive off as it was unintended. No. That is actually the second thing you said is the reason. The first thing you said isn't true. That's the reason why the second thing you said happened. Players would use subtractive palette and then either click off the subtractive palette buff itself to enable them to use water and blue instead of thunder and magenta, because the resource generation of water and blue was preferable to the potency from thunder and magenta. Or they would click off ether hues, you know, the buff that dictates what step in the combo you are on, so that you could more quickly get back to water and blue by just going Blizzard and Cyan, Stone and Yellow, Blizzard and Cyan. Instead of 1, 2, 3, you go 1, 2, 1 or 1, 1, 2. Which was only possible because these buffs could be clicked off. You can't anymore. But it was always a thing that you couldn't access the regular element, like the regular button, once you were in the subtractive version. Which is why I'm saying it's silly. It was released silly. And I stand by that it is silly. And the best reason why they're separate that I've ever received starts and ends at, well, how many buttons would they have if they were merged? Not a lot. Does that matter? Jose, Kaif, and Kat, hope you're doing well. And that is also something that is important to consider, Kaif, is that like a very classic conversation about combos in 14 is, well, what point is, like, for instance, take Warrior. It's actually not one of the best examples, but it's a decent example. Is there ever a situation where if you have currently used Heavy Swing, the next combo action you would want to use would be Maim? No. There's no situation where you'd rather use Heavy Swing again. Except for super niche things, but those super niche things, you could just use Tomahawk, because the niche things are usually, I don't want to do that much damage. So you have other options. Same, if you use Maim, is there ever a situation where you'd want to use Maim or Heavy Swing over Storm's Path or Storm's Eye? Probably not. So it makes sense to just have one button that is the 1, 2, 3 combo, and then just another button that is, for instance, just Storm's Eye, that, like, you know, lights up when you're in the step 3. That could work. But for the 3 other tanks, there are actually niche situations where if I go as Gunbreaker, is there ever a situation where after Keen Edge I would use Keen Edge instead of Brutal Shell? No, probably not. Are there situations where after Brutal Shell I would rather use Keen Edge over Solid Barrel? Yes, actually. There are. Because Solid Barrel does damage, it doesn't help me survive. Brutal Shell does, so in very, very niche situations, I might prefer to go Keen Edge, Brutal Shell again. But if they're one singular button, I can't. Like, I can't. It's not an option. The only way I would be able to do it would be to, you know, I don't know, run away and just do Demon Slice to deliberately break the combo. And for Dark Knight, it's even more niche, because it's like, is there ever a situation after Siphon Strike you'd like to break the combo to go hard slash again? Not really. For the most part, you'd probably want to use Soul Leader for the healing and the gauge, but there could be very, very niche situations where you're like just building resources, you're already maxed out your gauge, the enemy is not attacking, you're at full HP anyways, and you're just trying to build MP up for some sort of intermission or whatever, so you're just going 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, which you wouldn't be able to do if it was a single button, so that might not be appreciated. Although, you could of course overcome that problem by just using your AoE button instead. Which, you know, kind of solves that one. And then there's Paladin, who, by the way, can also solve that by just using their AoE combo instead. Although I believe, doesn't Prominence only generate 600 MP? I believe Riot Blade is 1000, while Prominence is 600. So again, there are situations where you'd rather just go 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. And there are other jobs where it is like that too. But it's more and more niche, the further removed from tanks you go. It's like, Pictomancer doesn't really have any reason to want to do that. Not really. Aside from the whole Ether Hue shenanigans with Subtractive Palette. I don't think Machinist has any reason whatsoever. Dancer doesn't have any reason. Viper doesn't have any reason. Ninja doesn't have any reason. None of them do. It's pretty much just tanks. And when you go over to DPS, the problem is more so that because of the complexity of some of those rotations and the combos, the amount of buttons you can remove gets reduced. Like for Monk, I mean, you could probably reduce these by just merging them down. Just down. But that would still only remove 3 out of the 6 buttons. Kai says Sword Oath attacks also give MP, so maybe these days it's worth staying in combo. The Sword Oath ones give 400. So if you go 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, you get 1000 every 2 GCDs, you get 500 per GCD invested. If you go 1-2, 3, Atonement, 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 you get a combined 2200 over 6 GCDs. So going 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 is 800 more MP. It kind of depends, and they could probably fix it by just going, how about we just, like, it would immediately be solved, or very close to, by just increasing the MP from Atonement combos a little bit. So there is a way to just go, yeah, well, you can't do that anymore, however, you don't want to anyway. Except, you know, in the level range where you can't use Atonement. As a gamer fan, and Nick, and Medusa, hope you're doing well. I don't really have any tips, Nick. You just play more White Mage. Make sure you're not wasting time healing when you don't have to. But don't forget to heal. Tongue? I want you to just really quickly take note that chat bubbles is something that is off by default. Gazel says, funny how many healers want to get away from hitting one button most of the time, while some DPS want one button combos. I would say my perspective on the matter is two-sided. On the one hand, if it's just effectively mash 1 and it doesn't matter anyway, then I can see the reason why you'd be sitting there like, why do I need to have this many buttons dedicated to this one thing? On the other hand, a lot of the time, I feel like when people ask for the combos to get consolidated into fewer buttons, what they're dreaming about is that those buttons are being replaced with something else, or in some cases, they just want less buttons. In the context where they're like, I just want less buttons, fair, but the alternative approach of I wish we had something else instead, my perspective on that is I feel like we have too many OGCDs. So, where do we go from there? I kind of covered that in my recent healer design video. That one way to make healing GCDs better would be to not have so many OGCDs. Boom, jams, problem, less bad. Not solved, but less bad. Just like that. I'll say Lone Wolf. Hope you're doing well. Best argument for button squish is future-proofing. Well, the problem is, and we kind of approached that on the Discord earlier, is if we squish the buttons, like we make it, like we remove a huge amount of buttons and like stack buttons on top of each other and stuff like that. So like make it so we have less buttons. But we don't learn from that. And when I say we, I mean the devs. And I mean, when I say we, I also mean players asking for stuff. If we don't learn from that mistake, then what happens is that we just take all of these like deconstructed sandwiches we have here that are our rotations and then just like mash them all into one big mega sandwich and just then give it like 2 or 3 expansions and then we're back where we started, except now we have like these like sandwich towers just whoa on top of having 3 hotbars worth of actions, and then we can squish them together again because God forbid that we remove anything, right? So it's not like we kind of need to have a more like we basically need to be able to accept that some things gotta go. Like just to take a completely random example from like the job that I'm looking at right now. If it wasn't for the addition of Wind's reply that actually does a little bit of something for your rotation, I don't think, like, I'm sure people would be like, oh, I miss Riddle of Wind, but largely speaking, this doesn't do anything. It makes you auto-attack faster. Like, this button could easily just be removed. And they could possibly save Wind's reply by, I don't know, shoving it in under Fire's reply. Although that would look a little bit weird. I'm aware that the problem is that they've decided that Monk has this Fire, Earth, and Wind theming going on, but then you have to put Wind on something else. You just have to put it on something else. Maybe make Brotherhood Riddle of Wind. And then, conveniently, you can shove Wind's reply in under Brotherhood. Oh, see, the thing is, Bovemet, I'm not disrespecting auto attack damage. I'm disrespecting the concept of reducing your auto attack delay. I wouldn't be surprised if most players reading this aren't entirely sure what that even means. They just know it means damage. And I'm just looking at this job and going, on this toolkit that we have right here, what button is just not needed? And I would say Riddle of Wind. You could just get rid of it. No problem. And most jobs have buttons like that, where you're looking at it like, I mean, it does have a niche application, but... you know... Can auto attacks crit? Yes. They can also direct hit. What would be the one for Sage? Evis is going to be really sad. Soteria would be missed by some of the more hardcore sages, because it did do something. But it's basically like if I went to any job and said one button must go, then Soteria would die if I was the job designer. And yeah, exactly, Nicholas. They could have more things be like that. In fact, you're right. Soteria could be saved if you could make it like they could make it stronger. They could make Soteria more powerful and make it so that, and I know Cardia is an OGSD, make it so that if Cardia is like Soteria as like some sort of mini GZD, and the reason why it has to be like a mini GZD is because you can't weave after Euphrasia. So, and then you could make Soteria way better because it costs a GZD to use. And Sage could have a lot of those, like a lot of things. Like they could have like the problem is mainly that Euphrasia works the way that it does. So it has to basically be a GZD that follows. But they could do that with a lot of the things. In fact, like if you really needed like squeeze things together more, they could do things like have Toxicon actually be Euphrasia Flavor. I don't recommend that one, but it would be a way to remove a button. But I am pretty sure that nearly every job has a button they don't need. Whether it's like how Showa went from being 2 buttons to 1, or it's Pictomancer that has like 4 buttons that they don't need to have. All of them has something that could be removed while changing basically nothing. Anyway, I will be right back. In the meantime, Amity restored. Alright, I'm back. Hey, Adrian. Hope you're doing well. Salted Earth from Dark Knight? Personally, I would say you could probably do something more interesting with Salted Earth. I'm a little bit sad that it is such a long cooldown. I wish it was shorter. If I was asked to remove something from Dark Knight, at present, without changing anything, I would probably remove Salted Earth too. However, I feel like there's something more that could be done here. Just thought about it, looked at it, and thought, how about take either some or all of the damage reduction on Oblation, put it in TBN, and just give TBN 2 charges. Just give TBN 2 charges. It still costs 3k MP. You'd probably need to have two slots for your Dark Arts. But there you go. Paladin? You merge these two. Just make it so the Holy Sheltron is used on either yourself or your target. Just like Heart of Corundum. I've actually also said, like, I actually made a video on the button bloat in 14 back in Endwalker, and I suggested you could just merge Expiation and Circle of Scorn. Just as an example. But I will say that I'm pretty sure that the reason why they're separated like this and both kept is a similar reason as to why Machinist has this. Anyway. Let's see. Is Sackboy here? Because the rest of my clips here involves Shack. What about Coven Clemency? See, the key here, Tongue, is that my stipulation was if you remove an action, it wouldn't change very much. And if you take away Cover or Clemency, that would massively impact Paladin's flexibility and their unique ability to do things. What would you remove from Dancer? Oh, here's Shaq. Hope you're doing well. I would probably remove a utility button in this specific case. Or, actually, better idea. You don't need Fan Dance 4. Just put some of that potency back into something else. Right. But Pretty Bird, you know what? You could just have Fan Dance 3 upgrade into Fan Dance 4 visually. How does that sound, Lumen? Imagine how many birds you could summon if Fan Dance 3 became Fan Dance 4. Tongue says, I've heard people requesting another Esprit spender on Dancer because other overcapping is annoying. I would say that wouldn't solve that, because the only way that would help is if the spender was OGCD. And if it is OGCD, then you have a whole new problem on your hands. Either the OGCD is better potency per second than the GCD, in which case you don't use the GCD anymore, or it's the other way around, in which case people will just complain that they don't have another good option to spend their Esprit on. Which is why my suggestion for fixing the Esprit overcapping problem is usually just make it so that during technical finish, Dancer's Esprit gauge has either 50 or 100 more cap. Just like how Monk can, like, has extra orb cap. Back in Stormblood. No, back in Shadowbringers, when Warriors Onslaught and Upheaval still cost Beast Gauge, yes, really, it was a genuine conversation whether it was a gain to just use Onslaught on cooldown, because Onslaught cost 20 gauge, was an OGCD, and did damage, and had a 10-second cooldown. Fellcleave, while costing 50, cost a GCD. So, is it better to just do your 1-2-3s and just use Onslaught on cooldown? Or should you use Fellcleave? I believe the calculation was close enough that it was like, no, Fellcleave is better, don't worry. But people were getting out the drums, the drum roll for the revelation that Fellcleave was actually bad. It wasn't, thankfully. But if you have an OGCD and GCD spender, then if the OGCD is objectively superior, then you just use that. If the GCD is objectively superior, then the OGCD is something you would use begrudgingly because you have to. They could, of course, solve it by being like, oh yeah, you have an extra Esprit spender. It's on a cooldown now. But I don't think it would solve the problem. Which is why I suggest just increase the cap, either permanently or temporarily. It says, Cass says, what about Astrologian? Would you remove Sinistry or something else? I would probably use remove Sinistry. Does an extra Esprit spender need to be a DPS thing? Could be a small potency heal. Let me put it like this, Tongue. The existence of energy drain should tell you that if Dancer had the option to spend Esprit on healing, they wouldn't. And if they did, it would be one of those things that other players would be like, no, don't do that. They could, but it wouldn't solve the problem. It would still be the same problem of we're overcapping on gauge, we can't spend it fast enough. How do you solve it? Either reduce the pace at which it is generated or make more space. If you give them more options to spend, they will use the best option. And if the best option doesn't solve the problem, then they still have a problem. Now, Sackboy here has posted a clip of their Astrologian hotbar on controller. So nice. So, the reason why I'm like, is... Yeah, exactly, Nosrael saw it too. The earthly star placement was very nice. May I also recommend, maybe, just a suggestion, putting your card menu, like, a little less completely out of the way? It's an important bar, you need to see it. Hey Falco, hope you're doing well. Also, just a random tip. Because you're going into this fight, knowing that you're going to use divination really quickly and you're going to use draw really quickly, a suggestion is already here while you're running. Hey Silva, hope you're doing well. We're checking out a clip from Sackboy. Since you know that you're going to be tossing your hand in a moment, use arrow on the tank now, while you're not in combat yet. The cards are down here. You see my cursor? It's down in the bottom to the right of the MP bar. But yeah, you can already here play your arrow on the tank, because you're gonna have trouble spending all of your cards in just a moment. Then, of course, you'd want to use your dot, get that one running. Possibly, you know, then weave Earthly Star and Light Speed. It's okay, Sackboy. I'm just reviewing it. I'm not being like, oh, garbage play, grr. Nah, I'm just, you know, pointing out what can be improved, as I normally do. Maybe it'll be useful. But yeah, you use Combust, good. And then you could, for instance, weave Earthly Star and Lightspeed. In fact, speaking of, you could weave Earthly Star here. And save that weave. So yeah, that's two things you could do before the fight even started. And then you go Combust, and then you could do Lightspeed right then. And because you would have already activated Lightspeed, you could go Malefic, Divination, Balance, Malefic, Lord of Crowns, Draw, Malefic, Spear. I don't think there's anything else you need to do at that point. But of course you're learning, so like it's a lot harder to just do that. Then you target the monk and then just go blip on the cards. Actually, you did manage to get your arrow on the tank. And you also did manage to get your spear on the Pictomancer, but yeah, the important bit is making sure you're only weaving two things at a time. But it is a nice solution to just have a set of macros to target with. I really like that. I believe I've heard others be like, they just, you know, flip through the menu. I'm guessing not the Astrologian mains. But big thumbs up on that one. Most definitely. And that's true, Zav. That's also a way you can do it. Is you can just look at the buttons to see what you have. The reason why I suggest having the UI up closer is because... Let me put it like this. If we just check this again. I don't do this myself. But I typically myself prefer to play jobs that go a little bit slower, so it's not that big of a deal. Some players like to have a bar like around here, somewhere around here, where they put buttons with cooldowns. More precisely, they don't put buttons with cooldowns. They put not functioning buttons. So they're like, instead of putting, for instance, ether flow, they would just go like this, put it somewhere. That was not actually a very good example because I can't test it while I'm not in combat. Like, say you want to track Swiftcast. This button doesn't work, so you could put it anywhere. You won't accidentally use it by clicking on it. However, if you press the actual Swiftcast, this button that doesn't do anything also goes on cooldown. So you can just put it here, so you can see it more easily. You can do the same thing with job gauges. The difference is that the job gauges are click-through by default, by design. So for instance, if you want to have your cards for Astrologian in a more clearly visible place where you're looking anyway, then they are better used like that than having a hotbar with them. Everyone has a different, everyone prefers to do it differently. So that's why I'm not like, oh, you have to do it like this. It is merely a suggestion that if it's all the way down there, then you're at a point where you might as well just hide it. You might as well just hide it at that point. Because like anytime your eyes would go down to see that, they would see this first. I'll say, Ariziel and Screeve, hope you're doing well. I used to use a lot of weak auras myself as well, but my experience going into Final Fantasy XIV is that the game simply went slowly enough that for me, it feels like for most jobs that I enjoy playing, that I press a GCD, look up at the enemy target, which I haven't moved because I haven't needed it. I might even check in on my buffs. I go over here, check in on the party list, and then I come down here, check on my cooldowns maybe, look at where I am, go have a cup of coffee, come back, and now my GCD is ready again. Yes, exaggerated comedic effect. So I don't need to change it because the game goes slower enough that I can do both. I can do it all without changing very much. I'll say, Dr. Guy, hope you're doing well. Exactly, Kaiv. Always scanning. Kiwi says, do you have general advice for who gets the DPS card if you feel the DPS are not bringing it? Do they still get the cards to push them, or do they go on the tank? Usually, because I don't use any tools, I can't see whether the tank or the DPS is doing more damage. However, if I can clearly see that the melee DPS is really not bringing it, then I would probably give the DPS card. If it, of course, melee card, I would give to the tank, because typically a tank will do more than half the damage of a DPS. Typically. Which means that the tank will get more, will produce more value by having it. But that's of course assuming that the DPS that is not bringing it is so bad that they can't keep up with the tank. For a ranged card, if your ranged DPS are not bringing it, but you have a melee DPS, then the melee DPS will typically be a better choice than yourself. But the melee DPS would have to do twice the DPS of the ranged DPS to make up the difference there. So it might still be better to put it on a lackluster ranged. Similarly, it's very possible that a lackluster melee is better than putting it on the tank. But it has to be really dire for the correct choice to be put it on yourself. And it is worth pointing out that Astrologian has at higher level gotten more burst, so if you're level 100 and you're the only ranged, it might be fine to put it on yourself for burst, because Oracle is pretty strong. But I would say the easier solution is just give the DPS the cards in that situation. Because Astrologian's personal damage is low enough that as long as the melee DPS is good, they will probably get more out of it. If you only have ranged players in the party, do you give the melee card to them or the tank? I would usually give it to the tank. Basically, Astrologian, uniquely among the healers, does less than half the damage of a DPS, typically. It's a little more vague than that, it's a little more complicated than that, but Astrologian specifically tends to have problems bringing half the damage of a DPS as personal damage, which is what matters when you're giving out cards. And that is also a good point, Lumen, that on AoE, Astrologian is a lot better. So that's also something that plays in. So it is essentially like a case of if you're asking for a general explanation, then I'll give a general suggestion. But yeah, on AoE, healers generally are very, very strong. But if we're talking a general case, Astrologian is the weakest at personal damage among the healers. So it would typically be better to put the cards on someone else. But then it also becomes complicated because it's like, if you're doing a burst during an AoE pack, which you will, then you could put the card on yourself. If it's on a boss, then don't put the card on yourself. What say you, Giddy? Hope you're doing well. That's also a good point, Lumen, that Lord will probably not be present before Spear. Is there anything I should watch out for to check damage, not only enmity? Without third-party tools, you don't really have that much else you can look for easily. When I say if I can see that a melee DPS is playing poorly, I mean use your eyes, look at what they're actually doing, and most players will just not be able to do that. I'm talking... just to give a random example, there was one of my Mentor Roulette videos. I believe I was Dark Knight in Praetorium. And during the Gaius fight at the end, I noticed that the Viper regularly had their buffs run out, including the buffs that makes their combo starters do more damage. And their combo finishers do more damage. And then I look at what they're doing, and I can see, like, stuff like this animation and this animation on single target, which is not single target. And I use that information to go, oh, they're not doing their rotation right. Like, that's the answer. They were straight up using they were basically just clicking buttons at random. And indeed, a moment later, for the intermission where there's like the 4 clones, I soloed a clone faster than them. But that would be what you would need to look for. The reason why I often don't give rando black mages cards in low-level dungeons is because I can see that they're doing it wrong. But yeah, a lot of the time people just don't know how to like see what an action looks like. looking at another player. Arisiel says, should I use enmity number thing, or is it not that accurate? Enmity numbers are usually a decent indicator, but it's not perfect. For instance, because tanks have an enmity multiplier, you can't use it to determine whether they're doing good damage. You straight up can't. The only thing you could tell is if both tanks have their stance on at the same time in like a trial situation or something, you would be able to tell which one does more damage based on who has more enmity. If neither of them has used provoke or shirk, of course, which will be really hard to keep track of. Point is, you can't use it for tanks. For healers, it is worth mentioning that while players have a tendency to exaggerate how much enmity is produced by healing, healing does produce a lot of enmity. Also true, Zav, it's difficult to use it for AoE situations because the enmity is all over the place. Like, I believe, as far as I recall, the healing enmity calculation is you take the amount of healing done by an action, add it all together, because it could be AoE, divide it by 2, then count the number of enemies that you're in combat with, divide the number by that, and then distribute that amount of enmity to each enemy. So if it's a single target boss fight, and you have a white... like, let's say it's Shiva Extreme. A random example. And you have a healer use Medicat 2. That generates 8 times buff enmity, which is basically nothing, and 8,000 cure potency. So 1,000 potency worth of enmity. However, some healing spells have innate additional negative modifiers. I believe some white mage actions actually only generate about a third of the healing done as enmity, and it's very possible Medica 2 is one of them. So it might actually only be 600 or 700. It's probably 700 if it is that. But 700 potency from one GCD at level 50 is a lot of enmity, right? And then you remember that you also have Maim and Mend, which means that it's actually 30% more than that. So it's like 900, even with like the even weaker multiplier. And like that's really hard to compete with. So if you have a healer just spamming AoEs, they will usually be really high on enmity because it generates a lot of enmity, even with all the negative multipliers pushing the other way. So sometimes it's not a good indicator for healers either, but that's where you have to pay attention to what they're doing. If they're like second or third in enmity and they don't have any MP left, and there hasn't been very many deaths, it's probably because they've been spamming AoE healing. It's not because they're doing a lot of damage. Nosworld says, the other day in Aurum Vale, I got called a Redditor for suggesting our tank should equip any accessories. And for saying that DPS LB is not affected by buffs or debuffs. Why is that a Redditor thing? Gazel says, needless to say, low-level Black Mage doesn't really do that good damage in the first place. I mean, at level 50, Black Mage can, with a little bit of luck, keep up with Reaper and Viper on single target. It's complicated in AoE, but they can actually keep up with these kind of jobs on single target. And when I say a little bit of luck, I'm talking about you need some lucky fire starter procs. Just a few. But Black Mage is actually decent. You just have to actually play perfectly. It's competitive. You just have to be perfect. Caetsu Chaiji 2025. Meanwhile, Viper just going 2 2 2 1 2 2 1 2 1 2 2 1 1 2 2. Brain slowly melting out of their ears. And Reaper's just going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm of course using myself as the point of reference that I often can keep up with it. And once you hit level 60, Black Mage is pretty fine. The problem is with low-level Black Mages that a lot of them don't know how to do it. And if you thought that doing it right is awkward at high level, then low level is total chaos. Like, I have shown this image many times from my transpose lines video. Which is essentially, when do you use flare on single target? And it's just like the whole screen filled with like asterisks and examples and like cases that you need to consider, and the potential gains and losses and how much random elements play in. And that's for level 50 to 59. Once you hit level 60, actually even at level 58 it might no longer matter, because at that point, because of the Umbral Hearts, you would have enough MP for a flare but not a fire one, so you don't have to choose. So, point being that low-level Black Mage is deceptively complicated, and a lot of people tend to downplay it by going, yeah, well, low-level Black Mage sucks anyways. Even though it's performance-wise, it's fine at low level. At least at level 50. And when you go below level 50, it of course massively nosedives. When you drop below Firestarter, it's really bad. When you drop below Fire 3, it's really bad. And at that point, it doesn't really get much worse than that. The one thing that would make low-level Black Mage a lot nicer to play, I think. And I said that before the 7.2 changes, and like, I mean, it would still help. It's less crucially necessary now, but it would still help, is if you could have 2 Firestarter stacks. Because then you don't have to, like, every time you press Fire 1, have to, like, stare at Fire 3 on the off chance it starts glowing. You could just, like, oh, it glows. I'll just use it on the next GCD. The problem with that is that immediately introduces more optimization. Which is to say, yeah, you could do that, but immediately even better is to hold one and spend the second one as you get it to do specific tricks. Like, most of the tricks on that single image that I mentioned boils down to, well, it depends on whether you get a Firestarter or not at this specific moment. But if you could just hold 2, then you could just save one, and then it's no longer random. Well, it's random whether you get it in the first place, but if you just get 1 proc, which is really likely, you can just hold that one. And then suddenly it's perfectly predictable. Black Mage, everyone. It's fun. Trust me. Right. How about we start with, I believe everyone that will show up for the Q40 thing here is here. So, clarification. Q40 is the shorthand I have been told, Jack, that Cat often does so while having the stream open on the other monitor or something, or in the background, so we'll just have to hope. Q40 is the shorthand for the new deep dungeon Pilgrim's Traverse. The floor 99 boss has a harder version that you can access once you have cleared it. See, there's Cat. And this harder version, you can choose to scale it from Q15 to 40. And the Q number is dependent on how strong you made each thing. Most people just do it at 40 because, you know, you'll have to learn 40 anyways, right? That's the hardest version. So there's a little bit of a look at how some of our raid team and EOS has been doing with that.
Off. I cannot believe I got clipped by that. That's insane.
I appreciate the censoring.
Wait. Nah. Delta. This is the last shelter I'm using.
Enjoy who was off.
Oh no. You said that you cannot fall in D and got clipped.
Roof. Stop middle.
I just wanted my deeper.
You know, when you have a stack, but you're missing a person.
I took 330k from that.
I just died to the fire blade of the chains, like the cross AoE. It does after.
I also appreciate that they still have the minimap and everything.
We burn down this ad now. You are now going to get penalized.
Oh, I
Get penalized.
I didn't realize that you paused it. I thought that something broke. DPS gets a debuff that makes it so that they get small deformation upon using an OGCD. Just to clarify, I believe deformation usually means circle AoE on them. Healer gets a large deformation upon using direct healing actions. Essentially, searing winds whenever you heal, I guess. And Cat is in the middle of a hypercharge window. And action. Exactly.
A test of your reflexes!
There you go.
I can't ODCD immediately. I'm going to.
At this point, I grabbed this tether.
Why was the only one that didn't die Cat?
So hellish Earth!
I'm surprised something else hasn't been found out yet that I need to fix before next time.
What?
Pop your eyes to HP markers.
Reprisal, Divine Veil.
Charlie
Oh.
for later. Charlie for later.
I see.
But yeah, I'm at oh, black screen. 82. Apparently, for some reason.
You've been getting weapons and lethal for stacks together.
Oh, the deformation doesn't hurt yourself.
I probably meant
okay.
to do solo runs
Right.
further for challenge luck and then didn't do the runs. Otherwise, I would have been back at 99 already. I was like, how do I have less HP than Shaq? That doesn't seem right. Oh.
So you griefed us by
You know.
April.
Look, the change in the amount of HP hasn't been an issue yet. I've died like 2 things as well. And it wasn't the HP difference that would have made me survive. So, you know.
True.
You mentioning needing bloodbaths to survive.
Yeah.
That was like, what do you mean? A little bit, but not enough to question you about it.
No, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Okay.
Oh my god. It's fine.
It's fine, it's not the healer.
Can we make sure tower is missed? I need to eat.
Please no.
My food falls off in a minute. Can we wipe?
Charlie.
You just have to eat.
right,
You just
I
have to
needed
weave
to eat.
eating.
You
Or
said
do
you wanted
we-
a mandated wipe so you could eat food.
I
You
mean, there's also just 5 minutes on the timer left as well.
It's fight short though. You got the hard first.
But the fight is 10 minutes. What do you mean?
Milo,
it's short?
Milo, if you're watching this in the future, you just gotta eat in between
You know what?
GCDs. You
After
just have to
months of
weave
holding
eating.
Blade, 10 minutes, that's pretty short.
5 bucks per left guy, come on.
Too many months.
Reprisal, Divine Veil.
Ooh,
Uh-oh.
the good pattern.
Me
Uh-oh. Okay, now I get how that mechanic
Let's go,
works.
cat.
I got confused by someone going east when I knew the safe spot was north, and then I didn't have time to go out.
I pressed A on my keyboard by accident as I was trying to
The classic someone else did something weird, so I forgot to move.
I saw someone going like to the right, it's like, huh, but it's north, I guess I'll follow. And then I didn't have time to go out.
Meanwhile,
I
me and
turned
Cat,
right.
meanwhile, me and Cat are out there when.
Do as I say, not as I do.
I also held A, but I turned
If I
my
recall
camera
correctly,
90
you
degrees
said
first.
that you were about 2 minutes into the fight.
This
Also
fight's
get
so movement heavy.
Best run of the day. Ah, okay. If the rest of the video is just this pull, that would be really funny.
I feel so comfy with this crit shield. You do that every time.
I'm not a scholar, you know how much that sage RNG is.
Charlie.
Probably even worse in Palace of the Dead. Or Deep Dungeon
Reprisal,
gear.
Divine Veil.
Hmm. It looked like you had the debuffs that from Sophia, where one had a light one and one had a dark one.
Out's fire.
Wait. Go. Refresh your debuffs from middle chains.
I thought I got checked.
Move.
Guardian,
Oh.
Sheltron, Passage.
Ah! Don't start either during that.
I'm provoking the ads. We burn this down now. Okay, don't use OGCDs now.
Because of the defamation.
Set up.
Can I OGCD now?
Yeah, as soon as you get it, don't do it till I can clear. What hit me for all the 9-10? Or did you go immediately?
Well, you basically had it. You were basically there. Right? But needs crazy amounts of healing. I remember right around when it was new that people proccing it we're talking about needing the healing potions just to survive it. Whether it is necessary or not, that is a pretty solid evidence that, yeah, it actually does a lot of damage. Should we go a bit more? Let's see if Kai can find the way down. But that was interesting. We haven't reached it yet. Even on the regular Pilgrim's Traverse. Our most recent go, we beat the floor 80 boss twice so far. But we've also wiped to it. Not our first try. On our second go, we wiped to it. And then we wiped to... I think we wiped on floor like 87 or 88 or something. And the worst part is that if we had just played a little bit more fast and loose with our options, we might have survived. And then we spent the rest of the evening just getting back to floor 81. So, we're trying our best, but I will also say in my defense that, I think we have like 96 weapon and like 67 armor. Either pool. And we've only procced as a team. Like, it's every time we find silver chests, it's either a bomb, one of those instance things, or it is weapon upgrades. And it's more often than not a bomb. Very fun. It's particularly sad because I believe the floor 80 boss gave us +5 on both things or something like that. Something surprisingly high amount, actually. Which means that we're so close to maxing out the weapons that the next time we get like a freebie boost like that, well, a freebie, a guaranteed boost, we're actually gonna cap on that, and then we're just like, bruh. Everything 50 onwards is a one-shot, so armor does not matter too much. It does matter, because there are actually some things you can survive, and sometimes it's just, you know, regular mob damage that can be a problem. But you're right, Johnny, that it isn't too bad to have low armor. It would just be nice if it wasn't like that. I'll say Zip Zap and Johnny, hope you're doing well. At least the bosses give you the poop, that is true. What really sucks is that the times where we've gotten a decent amount of armor upgrades, I think, we've often wiped. Hey Arian, hope you're doing well. Stone 30 boss gives +5/+5. I mean, if we're having a huge amount of trouble with progging, it might be that might just be the strat. Just use the closest checkpoint to get 5/5 and then 5/5 and then 5/5 until we're maxed out and then clear. But we'll get there. And the we I'm talking about is the same team that we're doing Fellowship with. It's also the team that we're doing some Pilgrim's Traverse with. And sometimes we're just really unlucky. Or really dumb. And I really emphasize on we on that one. But we are progressing it. Yeah, exactly, Shaq. Exactly. We are progressing it mostly blind. Like, in the blind in the sense that we're not looking anything up. So if we know something, it's because, you know, we randomly happened upon it. For instance, we kind of knew that, oh, there are invisible enemies on these floors because the Potato Squad had shown a little bit of a highlight of that. It didn't really change much because, you know, suddenly we're jumped by an invisible enemy and now we would know. So it doesn't really change much. And even though I believe we had seen the Cyclops boss in footage, none of us could remember its mechanics, so we promptly, instantly wiped. Also, Einstein, I'm guessing your name has changed with the YouTube changes. Hope you're doing well. Because the profile picture looks recognizable, but the name does not. And then, of course, we've seen some footage of Floor 99, but I don't actually remember. Like, the Quantum version is different. It's not even that, Zipzap. It's we died instantly to the first mechanic. The exclamation that came after we wiped was, "Oh right, they're donuts." As we looked at duty failed. The problem was that we didn't have enough time to react to it in time. I think we all died to 2 explosions before we could move in time. And the only one that survived for a third one, I think, was Sip. He was tanking. And he died to the third one before we could, again, like, process what was happening. But once we knew, we got it on the go again. And yeah, Jeff, we beat it very recently, actually. We killed it Saturday. Twice even. The Cactuar boss is very, very difficult. Did you get your weapon? I didn't win anything. I didn't win anything. But we'll keep farming it until we have everyone has gotten the mount. Which, by elimination, will mean everyone will have gotten a weapon. But yeah, speaking of the Pilgrim's Traverse bosses, I kind of like the Floor 80 boss. I think it's pretty nice. Like, a lot of those bosses have, like, only a few mechanics. Demon guy? No, it's a bird. Right, it's not a bird, it's the quirrell, that's true. For some reason, in my mind, because of the way it poses, I envisioned something akin to the Griffins from, for instance, Dusk Vigil. Because that kind of curl uses a very, very similar rig. But it's true, it's a curl. It does the it does front and back cleaves and donuts and circles. And then it has a mechanic where it doles out debuffs for the team. Half the team has to be killed by the front or back cleave, I believe. And the other half has to move a very, very small amount or they will die. And then also has like a random thing with like orbs that explode. That arguably doesn't really mesh with the rest of the toolkit. It's just there too. I mean, you need to get hit by it, but... I think we just processed it as... similar to the O4S mechanic, where you have to be hit by something that kills you. Like, normally it'll kill you anyway, but you need to be hit by it to survive in that specific instance. That's how I processed it anyway. Imagine a mechanic where you have to die to resolve it. You don't have to imagine. In O4S, which is a Neo X death, there is a mechanic where he puts a debuff on you that basically goes, in 15 seconds you die, unless you take lethal damage. If you take lethal damage, the debuff just goes away. So you don't have to imagine it. It exists, it's real. The 80 bounce is the only one that forces you to chuck potions because of his auto attacks when soloing on DPS, even through steel. Huh. Jeff says you were playing back in the first tier of Stormblood. I was playing in the first tier of Stormblood because I got into the game there. I was not Savage raiding. I know of this debuff because when I was farming O4S unsynced in Shadowbringers, the fight was long enough that you actually had to deal with that mechanic and a few others. We actually had to resolve some of those crazy debuff sandwiches. But I got into Final Fantasy XIV. Like, the story basically goes, I discovered the game at, like, Heavensward. Noticed Ninja, looked at some of his actions, was like, oh, that's interesting. Looked up a video on it, and the person making the video was basically just highlighting all the jank of Ninja, which gave me the impression that, oh, that doesn't sound very fun. I have a feeling the other jobs are going to be just as janky then. And then I didn't play. Then Stormblood comes out, I learn of it, realize that Red Mage is an option, and it doesn't even matter how it plays. I need that. So here we go. Final Fantasy XIV. And my first level 70 job was indeed Red Mage. So but yeah, I didn't Savage raid until like mid Shadowbringers, and only for a period, because my original reason for getting into 14 was because I wanted to get away from the more hardcore raiding of WoW. And in WoW, every time I played, it was pretty much inevitable that I would end up in a raid team and then have, you know, like 3 raid nights a week or something like that. And I just didn't want that. So when I got into 14, I avoided Alliance raids, I avoided normal raids, I avoided everything that had raid in the name. And at the time, the Crystal Tower raids wasn't mandatory, so I didn't run into the position of, well, you have to. So I just didn't. Which also meant that the main content I interacted with at max level in Stormblood was Eureka and daily roulettes. Mainly dungeons. Because I was so afraid of landing in that situation again. I just wanted to play a little bit casually. I didn't want to be in a Savage Raid team. Well, I mean, Ariziel, there are all, like, there's a variety of everything. Like, there are WoW guilds that raid 7 days a week until they've beaten it. Did you avoid Baldesion Arsenal too? Jeff, I got into the game when there was only one part in Eureka. And I learned that I didn't actually enjoy Eureka, so I quit before the second section came. And I got back into the game like so late Stormblood that Blue Mage already existed. Because what got me back was, oh, we have Blue Mage now. I'm like, oh, fantastic. I love that one too. Got into the game, leveled up Blue Mage, got all of the spells pretty much. And then Shadowbringers launched, and then I stuck around to see the first raid tier there drop, and I did the normal raids there. And a little bit after I quit again, and then I came back somewhere early mid second raid tier, and well, I haven't quit since. So, yeah, 00 says, is Red Mage still your favorite? I don't play Red Mage that much in 14. I prefer Black Mage playstyle, both before and after the 7.2 rework. But I think that is more so an ignorance is bliss kind of problem. Because what makes me not super enjoy Red Mage is that if you're not paying attention, it is very easy to make some very simple mistakes. And knowing that those mistakes are there and you're making them, for me, affects my enjoyment of the job. Whereas for Black Mage, I don't feel like I can do that in the same way, so it's just more fun that way. There are multiple jobs that are like that, and Red Mage is just one of them, where I'm like, very easy to make mistakes. So I'd rather just not. Sylvia says, what are some other blue spells you're hoping for in 7.5? I actually mentioned that in a very recent stream. I want page 9 and the rest of page 8. I want 12, yes, 12 more OGSD attacks. Of varying potencies and cooldowns. Why? Because right now, the way Blue Mage works, largely speaking, is you grab the absolute essential actions. Just the absolutely necessary ones. Like if you're a tank, you need Mighty Guard. Everyone needs Ethereal Mimicry. And so on. Like you grab the essentials. And then you basically fill up with as many OGSDs as you can. And then you have to, like, you may sometimes be like, well, I really need this extra thing, and then you have to, like, weigh that against an OGSD. But at present, there's so many OGSDs that you only have to sacrifice a few things to make that happen. By the way, I don't use this build. It's just I've been using Apocalypsis to show things, so it's toggled. Don't know why. Been a little bit since I've been using Blue Mage in actual duty. But if they had 24 OGSD attacks, then you would actually, like, you could basically start by just filling in all of the OGCD attacks and then going, well, I don't need this one. And then you put Ethereal Mimicry in, and you're like, well, I don't need this one. And you put in Mighty Guard if you're a tank. Like, and you just, like, fill in. And I feel like Blue Mage doesn't really need anything. They could use maybe a healing OGCD. That could be nice. Tanks could maybe use a decent ranged attack with like low potency, high enmity, instant, so it's easier to pick up individual mobs. You can use OGCDs for it, but it would be nice. And also tanks could really use a different taunt than frog legs. That would be nice. But other than that, just an avalanche of OGCD attacks, because clearly that's what the Blue Mages want. If you look at how much of their toolkit is OGCDs, is, yep, I need this, this, and this, and then OGCDs. So I feel like that would be funny, but they don't really need anything, and I'm like pretty indifferent to giving them something specific. I'm still a little saddened that they didn't see it as an opportunity to give Blue Mages a limit break when they hit Shadowbringers. That would have been nice. Anyway, next up we have Shaq in Meso Terminal as Bard. Yeah, he sounds very different in Japanese. Yeah, I was about to say, I think you forgot Radiant Finale. Oh boy. That was pretty good call. You missed out on a pitch perfect, but then again, if you actually sent the pitch perfect single stack, you might have, like, the mob might have died before you could mage spell it. So that's probably the better call, so you could keep the song going. But the simple fact of the matter is that Bard in dungeons tends to be really awkward. Personally, I would probably have held the Apex arrow until the pack had been fully pulled. Although that can of course lead to some problems with timing on the next Apex arrow being available and ready. Oop. There might be, it's very, very lucky positioning of the mob, but there could have been something to be said that maybe it would be better to have your main target as a different one that was more centered. I do feel like there's a little bit of a choice paralysis here. Because a lot of the time when you like skip a beat is when there's more than one option that really you should press. If that makes sense. Priority and burst cycle. There is, of course, you know, a most perfect answer. But the important part once you have your is to get like your buffs out. Get the buffs out the door, make sure your dots don't drop. And then you like if you have maxed out your song gauge, then you want to try and get the apex arrow out the door a little quickly. But aside from that, you want to make sure you use pitch perfect when it hits 3 stacks, and you want to make sure that Heartseeker is not sitting on 3 stacks. Songs? But the important bit is making sure that all the things in your in the cooldown arsenal, your lunchbox, as it were, is properly spent. Oh, this is also awkward when you sit for too long without using a song, then suddenly you're like, well, I can't just skip the song. So you just sit there with your 2-minute burst ready, but you're waiting for one of those minuets that all lines up together again. That looked like a good start, and then the boss died. It was a good start. And then the boss died. But it is ultimately just if we take a little bit of a detour to Dragoon, it might make a little bit better sense. Because Dragoon's burst similarly has 3 buttons they want to start up with, you know, their buffs. And they have a resource that they want to not overcap on in Wormwind Thrust. A lot simpler than what Bard has to deal with. But once you have that going, the rest is just get your cooldowns on cooldown, use the things that spend resources or have cooldowns first, weave those first, and then weave the things that are just on a timer later. So you'd be like, okay, I need to get Lance Charge and Battle Litany on cooldown, I need to get Geistgefühl on cooldown. You want to use Geistgefühl third because it does damage, so it benefits from the other 2. And then you want to get Jump on cooldown, you want to get Dragonfire Dive on cooldown, you want to get... Wait, no, that's it. You want to get those 2 on cooldown. You want to make sure, like, if you're just about... Actually, if you want to get Life Surge spent, if it's sitting on 2 charge, you want to spend 1 quickly. If you're sitting on 2, like, with a Wormwind Thrust ready to go, then you want to, like, send it so you don't, like, get another stack that you can't fit. And then you start working through all those timers. Mirage Dive, Rise of the Dragon, Stardiver, Starcross, all of those things that, and Nathrond, all those things that are just like, well, you get 1, but you have like 20 seconds to spend it. So you just get around to it. Bard is the same, the difference is just that there's more things with cooldowns and less lunchbox. An additional tip here is also that during Mage's Ballad, you probably want to weave Heartbreak on every GCD you can. And if it's available, send it, because otherwise this happens. And the moment Mage's Ballad is over, if you've been diligently spending your Heartbreaks, then you will have 0 charges. And it will take like 30 seconds or more before Wanderer's Minuet starts. And when Wanderer's Minuet starts is where you'd want to spend... Like, that's when you want to use Heartbreak shots again anyway. So, like, if you just go... Oh, the summoner died. If you just go full Turbo Blast on spending the Heartbreak shots during Mage's Ballad, and then the rotation goes correctly after that, then you don't have to spend any during Army's Payon most of the time. Which gives you, like, some breathing room. You know, I was thinking about that one too, Zarian. I'm wondering, will that do damage once they get their buff up? Nice. I would have been hit if that was me. I would have ran straight into the line to get out of the donut. And also, let me just oop. Just rewind to here. A little tip for planning during Wanderer's Minuet. Like, Wanderer's Minuet is really, really awkward in planning and all that, because it kind of just butts its way in. Like, now you have to give me attention. Because you only get a stack, maybe, every 3 seconds, keeping track of this timer can be very helpful. Where it gets the most awkward, and this is why I rewinded, is if you have 2 stacks and Imperial arrows getting ready, then you get put in a very weird spot where, I believe I go over this in my Bard guide actually, where, depending on the timing, you have to be like, can I GCD Imperial arrow pitch perfect before this timer hits 6? If the answer is yes, then it doesn't matter that the timer is going to hit 6 in a moment. If the answer is no, then you're suddenly put in the opposite position of, there is a 20% chance that I don't get a stack, and in that situation, it would be optimal to do GZD Imperial Arrow pitch perfect, because it'll get more value out of the stacks. But in the 80% scenario where you do get a stack from it hitting 6, the optimal sequence would be GZD pitch perfect Imperial Arrow. Or alternatively, just pitch perfect right now, just to get rid of it. Because losing a stack is more damage lost than the gain from hitting 3 would be. Like, 2 stacks is better than 1 3 stack. And we can see, actually, in the UI what happens. So here we have 45. So if this hits 55 before pitch perfect is sent, then we lost a stack. You can see GCD, Imperial Arrow, 50 from the Imperial Arrow. Mash the pitch perfect, didn't, 55. So this was the 80% scenario. It's like a really, really specific thing, but it comes up in every... And also, you can see here, another thing that is really awkward with optimizing Wanderer's Minuet is when it hits 3, is when you want to get out of Wondrous Minuet, because you're not going to get any more repertoire procs after that. So might as well start the next timer. But if the 3 gives you a stack, then here you want to use GZD, Pitch Perfect, Mage's Ballad. GZD, Pitch Perfect, Mage's Ballad, so you don't lose out on those free 100 potency. This is, by the way, actually another example. I said the thing with Red Mage. This is also why I'm not the biggest fan of playing Bard. Because I see all those things and just sit there like, ugh. Because I can't do it perfectly either. But I can see the problems. Ooh. Your toe got smashed. I'm guessing the ad that is still alive. Oh, the song thing again. I'm guessing the ad that is still alive is the DPS's one. Because they died. Indeed. Yeah, same, Ilana. Same. It's a lot. It's like, I also said Bard in a dungeon is really awkward. It is, Bard and Ninja are the jobs where I'm like, if I'm choosing what job I'm playing, I would probably never choose Bard or Ninja in a dungeon. Because it's so easy for everything to just get wacky because of timings. Oop. Ilya says, ironically, Ninja and Bard are my go-tos. Well, I mean, if it's your favorite job, then it makes more sense. I imagine a lot of people are like, why would you bring Black Mage to a dungeon? Meanwhile, Black Mage is probably my favorite job to bring to a dungeon. They only gain from downtime. Yes, yes. Go over there and let me sit here and build my my polyglots. I'll be over here if you need me. Black Mage is an exceptionally good job at open world content. Zarian says, I main healer and I like Ninja and Dungeons. Probably because I don't know I'm making mistakes. Possibly. And yeah, like that's exactly what I mean by the reason why I don't like to play certain jobs is because I know that I'm making mistakes. Hence, ignorance is bliss. Sometimes just not knowing is for the best. Sometimes just choosing to not care is the best. And I have done that. And there's also something to be said that that once you understand Black Mage, it's actually incredible how freeing its toolkit is compared to other jobs. Like, if you've watched the Savage streams, it's quite frequently when we end up talking about like 2-minute burst timings that I very, very clearly indicate that I have no clue when the 2-minute burst is taking place. Because my rotation is so, like, free form that, like, I'll burst when I can. If that happens to be during the 2-minute burst, great. Usually it is. But sometimes it's like, oh, the 2-minute burst is during a mobility section? Fantastic, I can't put down ley lines there. Ah, you missed the pitch perfect. I think something that will probably help a lot, Shaq, is if you can get routined enough with Bart that you can keep the rhythm of getting the GCD out without getting distracted by all of the options you need to keep track of. If you can just keep the GCD rolling, then it's going to feel a lot smoother, because like while the GCD is every 2.5 seconds and sometimes faster during Army's Payon, for instance, by making sure that that one is consistent, at least, it'll feel more predictable whether you, for instance, can or cannot fit pitch perfect before the next song tick. Or how Imperial Arrow is going to line up, because Imperial Arrow's cooldown is fixed. So it'll be about every sixth GCD, close to every 7th during Army's Payon. But if you can make sure the GCD is always rolling, that will help tremendously. I think Gasol also pointed out that sometimes you would use Iron Jaws before one of your damage boss was ending, but not all of them. Ooh, Summoner dead again. I'm too concerned about getting Troubadour out of the stack. Oh, in this particular case, when I'm talking about letting the GCD drift and things like that, I'm of course thinking more generally, but in that specific case where you lost the pitch perfect, I assume that was when it happened. I would say in that specific case, if it was me, I would have probably just had gone, well, I'll use Troubadour when I can. Nope. I get knocked down, but I get up again. See, Brontom says, I did this raid here on Samurai, and I can confidently say that doing Savage on Samurai has made me incredible on Samurai, and worse on Paladin, my main job. Really, it's just practice on procs, because you leave the job, and all of a sudden you're way worse. Yeah, I have described some jobs as being bad as a secondary. Before the 7.2 changes of Black Mage, I typically described Black Mage as a job that you could that didn't work as a secondary. Not really. It had to be your main. Nowadays, I would say Black Mage is possibly an extremely good secondary. Of course, you know, it has all of its intricacies that you might not be too privy to if it's your secondary, but the job functions well enough on the basics. And to be fair, 0-0, if you're doing, if it's in Savage content, you'd probably eventually get used to when the 2-minute burst timing is and do it. But if it's for more casual content, it's really difficult to line up with bursts. My advice would be to if you want to practice this, just get used to holding the gauge for Reawaken, and then if you see a buff on you, hey, send it. Uh-oh. There's some good discussion to be had on main and secondaries. Yeah, I could imagine. And then let's finish, I think, with Shaq's POV of our recent Savage clear. How different does it look? Look at all these wonderful people, right? For those that never got the story, we dress up for prog because it's funny. So for M8S, our theme was Arcadion bosses and similar. So we have Wicked Thunder over here. And we have a Yan. Just straight up a Yan. We have Sugar Riot. That's Jack. We have a Mew. That's Sip. Milo. Ham. We have a Gimme Cat. That's Aradel. We have Black Cat as Cat. And we have Honeybee Lovely as Naomi. And we have Dancing Pink, or Dancing Green, as me. You know, the funny bit is that the only difference on this set from my M5S set, which was a disco theme, is that I put green ears on it.
Okay.
I was just doing something else.
Voice comms, etc. Due to me having the raid stream open on my second monitor, callouts will be delayed. That seems very cursed. Could you hear both? Oh dear.
Yeah, like some EOS. Or Carbuncle, I guess.
Wait, why am I your focus target? Slither, when do you slither to me? With first on spread since Restful break. Oh. Right. Yeah, that's very convenient because I'll be hanging out where we need to stack anyway.
Counter. Knock back. Counter. Knock back.
Wow, you got very far away from where from your corner. Here's a funny little story while the fight progresses. Every time that I've had an idea for something in a video where I'm referring to the sound that is played when you generate active limit break gauge, like the clapping sound, I've tried to use footage from M8S, but every time I've saved the footage, it has not included the clapping sound because we've just, that specific pull we didn't do it. Like in that specific pull we didn't drop low enough for that to happen. Consistently. So I end up using something a little more scuffed because I just don't have the footage I wanted. This bit must really suck as a job like Viper. Where you're just standing there.
Colors and shapes.
Like one of the few jobs that has nothing they can plan in downtime. Nice. Now that's why. I was wondering why you suddenly had to stop your 1, 2, 3s for that wise wine. Then it's like, oh, it's because you're setting up for the double.
Color places. Garden.
No, the positional damage. It comes with practice, Sackboy. This is after over 800 pulls.
Move. It's a comb. Remember the heads. Comb heads.
It comes with practice. I don't think you had to use a true north there.
4,
Uh-oh.
2. DPS. Cardinals, Cardinals, Cardinals. Outs, Cardinals, outs, Cardinals.
You know, Naomi, sad pies when the noises. Oh, oops. Oh no. Oh no. You should see from my perspective. For the Stone and Wind Fang, I pretty much, like for the Stone Fangs, I pretty much move in the very last frame. Originally, I found ways to move a little sooner, but originally I moved like so close that I'm pretty sure that there was some latency shenanigans that allowed me to. Then I found out that I could start my opener even sooner, and then I had like a second. But I learned that from all of those pulls.
Alright, Night Party Koka.
It must be weird to see my rotation play out on your screen like that. He sounds more monster-like in Japanese.
Lefts, outs. Koka next.
mean, the slight delay on the voice comms there is not too bad. Uh-oh.
You get to real for me. I say,
Oh wow, it looks so different over here. And then you can see over there Cat that flexed to take Ardal's spot due to the death.
we have it in the west.
West.
Yeah, see, hope you're doing well. Right? I asked about it at the start, it's to use Slither for a very specific thing in phase 1.
Start moving south after. Start with in, donut next. Right, donut. Left, line next. Left, in next. Right, out next. Left. Light parties after.
Nice. Only one got hit?
Should be Konga as well.
That was well spotted. I don't think that like that cannon barely appeared on your screen as you went left.
Lights.
Uh-oh.
Chilling in this.
Uh-oh. Ah, Mito was trying to nascent flash, right?
Get Konga sword. Get south to sea.
And here comes the grand finale.
I used Adel just now. Ah, I think so. Sorry, Cat. I was an idiot.
Fade.
Fade. Now go. Hero Roaxus, we're doing well. I'll get to that in a moment.
Fade. Nexus, Ginseng.
Go.
Fade. Fade.
Go.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say building time. We will not have Adel this last one fighting.
It's just the finale of the clip.
I might be able to Adel later, but that's it. Give everything you have, guys. Come on. Nice! Yes.
Let's go!
I'm hungry.
I'm gonna run away. For 2 seconds.
I get you guys.
We're very good at the gamer screams part of clearing a boss. Yes! Be right back. I'm hungry. Fantastic, guys. Incredible.
Don't contact. We need to pay.
Most important part of today.
Yeah, exactly, Turkey. Well, you know, we beat it in 1 hour. Nice. So to the question you, well, kind of question you raised, Roboxus, Viper doesn't have that many things they need to worry about, but they do have a few things. You of course want to use Serpent's Ire on cooldown. You don't want to at any point generate a rattling coil when you already have 3, which means you spend down to 2 before you use Serpent's Ire if you have 3. You want to spend down to 2 before you use Vicewinder if you had 3. Which actually often means that unless you know you need 3 for something, it's probably better to just spend down to 2 immediately when you hit 3. So you have 1 in case you need to use Serpent's Ire or Vicewinder certainly. And you don't want to sit on 2 charges of Vicewinder pretty much ever. Preferably you might as well go down to 0, but there is something to be said about the 2-minute burst. The optimal 2-minute burst is 2 full reawakens, and preferably the first reawaken starts like a little bit before 2-minute cooldowns happen. You can't really rely on this in casual content, but like in a coordinated team you might be able to. And aside from that, you know, make sure you use your resources smartly to your 1-2-3s. Make sure you don't overcap on gauge. To do the double reawaken for the 2-minute burst, you of course need to have 50 in the tank and also Serpent's Ire. That's how it's done, anyway. And in the footage we just saw, there were a few places where Shaq didn't click the correct glowy button in the 1-2-3, which is usually around 100 potency lost each time. Not that many times, but it happened a few times. There's usually at times where Shaq was pretty busy, so they, like, you know, just press something, and granted, better to do something than nothing. There was also a few points where, there was one point where Shaq used True North, while he was in a perfect position to just move for the positional. And then didn't have True North moments later when that was no longer possible. This was leading up to Beck and Moonlight, I believe. There was also several points where Vicewinder sat at 2 charges. This was something that we also talked about back on M5S, I believe. It is something that can be difficult when a lot of stuff is happening at once. And the thing is, what makes it really difficult is the habit is difficult. Because if you're not already using it on cooldown, then you don't know exactly when you're gonna have them. Like, if it hits 2 charges, then you don't know when you're supposed to have them. So you essentially need to do it perfectly, and then eventually you'll learn that these are the times where I have Vicewinder, so I should use it there. In a similar fashion to how, like, I can say just off memory, my first mana font outside of the opener happens during the first multi-stack. And as Black Mage. And I do that specific mana font with a mana font extension, because the first one I do with the GCD that I have on my Black Mage happens to come up such that I finish the Astral Fire state, I switch to Ice, I use Paradox, I refresh Thunder at some point, and I spent whatever polyglots I have remaining, and then mana font is ready. I could do it in a different way if I really wanted to save polyglots, but it actually works out pretty nicely, which is why I do it like that. Part of the reason why there's not that many options to change up is because the very first mana font after the opener, you don't have a fire starter, so you don't get very much value out of despair shenanigans. So, like, specifically that one, you can't really. And I know that because it comes up so consistently. I also know that right after, I have a sequence of like 2 Fire Force, Paradox, Amplifier, Xenoglossy, ley lines, and it has to be like bam, 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 because if I don't get that ley line, then the pillars falling will happen while my ley lines are still present. This is Black Mage, not Viper, but the concept of knowing that cooldown is ready at that point specifically makes it a lot easier to plan out what you're gonna do. I think the main thing Rovok says is I believe it has the highest actions per minute of all jobs. And it has a lot of opportunities to press the wrong button. Granted, what the correct button is in a given situation is not that hard to decipher. The problem is more so that you don't have as long to determine what the correct button is, and you're just getting like just destroyed, just nuked with opportunities to click the wrong button. Like, you just have to click the glowy button, but if you're looking over here and your glowy button is down there, then you don't know which one is glowy right now, unless you paid attention to what you just pressed and what you're going to press next. Which also means that if you goof up the step 1, it often will mean that you will goof up the step 1 twice. Because due to the step 1s and 2s going like hand in hand, you go like 2, 2, and then 1 or 2, and then you go 1, 1, and then 1 or 2, means that if you goof it up, you're probably gonna goof it up one more time, either by accident or even just deliberately to fix it again. So 1 mistake usually becomes 2, and 1 mistake is 100 potency, and 2 mistakes is 200 potency. And they can quickly add up. Just not being fast enough to press Death Rattle before the next GZD, boom, nearly 300 potency lost, like that. And that happened a few times as well in this poll, where Shaq would not be able to press Death Rattle in time. And then, like, again, it's probably better to send your GZD and keep moving. So it's complicated. It's not as simple as people make it out to be, but it's also not as complicated as people make it out to be. Sagwise says, I think my cards plus buffs are more important than 1 GCD since I don't do Savage anyway. Well, let's just say that 1 Malefic is worth several seconds of your card buff. I believe we had a calculation just the other day where we had like a joking suggestion that what if the cards were GCDs? And I believe Cole determined that putting the melee card on essentially the best samurai presently was worth slightly more than like 1 or 2, like I believe it was worth 1.4 Fall Malefics, which is like the high level version of Malefic. Which is to say, actually no, casting Malefic is really important. Like really, really important to get those out the door on time. Because if you don't, then the card is almost meaningless. And because it's worth about 1.5 Malefic on the best possible option. So it's going to be worth less on non-Savage raiders. Brandom says, for real, that feels so wrong. Let's say that the samurai did 6,000 potency worth of damage during your card. Which is possible. Actually, probably reasonably close to what it actually is. Your card adds 6% to that. That's how much potency your card produced. 360 in that specific example. Fall Malefic is 270. Your GCD is important, guys, and Astrologian does a lot more damage than you think. Your GCD is important. And while, yes, it's just casual content, you don't have to like super sweat over it. Don't just throw it aside and be like, well, it doesn't matter, it's just casual content. You can do better. Believe in the me that believes in your ability to do better. You don't have to, but wouldn't it be cool? If you could anyway. Wouldn't it be cool if you could anyway? That's the spirit, Mistil. Exactly, Red Master. Like when playing sport, you should still try your best, even if it's just practice that you improve. My fingers aren't fast enough, I think. That's something to practice. The thing is, you can do it over more GCDs. And it can be something to practice. The problem is, if you just determine that you can't do it, then you'll never try. How many buffs on that samurai would it take for that card to have a real impact? Let me put it like this, Brontome, that while buffs stack multiplicatively, the impact on an individual buff by the stacking is pathetic. Just to give you a simple example of this, one that I like to use is Dragoon Lance Charge plus Geishgagul is 10% and 15% more damage. I prefer to use 10 and 10, it's easier to read, but let's say 10 and 15. So you do 10% more damage times 15% more damage. Technically, you're gaining 1.5% extra damage from doing this. Arguably, the Geishgagul is responsible for for actually three-fifths of that, while Lance Charge is responsible for 2/5 of that. So if we just subtract the 1.25 from this, this is what you gain from stacking them. And if we then divide that by 5 and multiply it by 3, this is how much extra value Geishgagul got from stacking them. 0.9%. Which is to say, you would need an extraordinary amount of buffs for the card to suddenly be so much better that it doesn't matter how good the person you're putting the card on will beat Fall Malefic. Like, granted, the card on the best samurai, which you're not having, but if you did, becomes worth like 1.4, 1.5 Fall Malefics-ish. On the average player, it's probably going to be closer to 1. Which means if you're losing a Fall Malefic to put a card on someone, then you just managed to make the card pointless. I get it, Sackboy. I'm basically just saying, practice. Try and space it out over more GCDs, for instance. And yeah, Zarian says, you could also just spread it out one thing per GCD. Like just one thing at a time. And then once you get really good, you might be able to condense it more. But it's just about practice. And I know that it is harder on controller. But if you don't try, then it won't work. Or it will never happen, I suppose. Brontome says, I basically just learned that party buffs are worth a healer's GCD of damage. Well, to be fair, Brontome, Divination is 8 of those. So, it's a little better. But the reason why we even came to this was because of a random suggestion that imagine if the cards were GCDs. And I was immediately like, well, how much damage increase would a card need to be for it to be worth using as a GCD over just spamming Fall Malefic? And then Cole came in with the math and was like, well, I mean, it'll be worth like 1.4 or 1.5 Fall Malefics. Which means that if it was a GCD, it would essentially be worth 0.4 Fall Malefics in gain, because it costs you a Fall Malefic to use. It's very convenient that we happen to have done that math. But yeah, try. I'm not saying it's easy. And it probably takes a lot of practice. You can actually, you could practice it with it's not quite the same. And I know if you're alone, you can technically play the cards without targeting yourself. But what you could do is, if you find a striking dummy where you can have Chocobos, you can use your Chocobo as the person you need to buff, and yourself as the other person you need to buff if you want to practice that too. And then just, you know, choose to say, I have to target myself for playing the card. And then you can practice it as long as you want, with no mechanics or anything. Just you, striking dummy, a chicken, and your cards. And then you could practice it. It's just a suggestion. As I said, you don't have to, for casual content, be able to do this, but you don't have to also not even, like, you don't have to not do it. It would be cool, right? You could also use macros to target, but I do think that your system of having, like, bars that can just target someone is probably more reliable. Anyway, I think that we will be wrapping up the stream from here. So, if you would like to be part of the Discord community server, there's a link right there in the chat. There you'll find the weekly schedule where you can see what else is coming up in the coming days. I usually updated Sunday or Monday. You'll also find the announcement room with links to videos and streams and put them out. And if you grab the reminder role in the role assignments room, you'll get a notification whenever I post a video or stream. As well as an extra one around 15 minutes before stream starts. You can catch it right when we go live. And if you'd like to support the channel even more directly, you can become a member, you can subscribe, you can follow, you can like the stream on YouTube, you can use the cheers, the super chats, all that goodness. And if you don't like any of that, there's also the Ko-Fi link in the description. It all helps support me and the channel directly, so I can focus on doing stuff like this with all of you. So thank you so much for the support. But that'll be all from me. So good night, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are in the world, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye bye.